and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the third Moses Kotane Annual Memorial Lecture. I would like to take this opportunity to extend a warm word of welcome to our keynote speaker and a newly graduate with a fresh from the box MBA, Honorable Kwete Mantashe. I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the leadership of the South African Communist Party, led by its General Secretary, Comrade Dr. Blade Nzimande, and all the officials, as well as the members of the Central Committee, and the leadership of the South African Communist Party in Gauteng province who are joining us online. The leadership of the African National Congress and the leadership of COSATU, and all fraternal organizations present here this afternoon. Of the Management Executive Committee who are joining us online. Ambassador Joe Kotane and the entire family, the entire Kotane family. The leadership of the Moses Kotane Foundation, led by its CEO, Stephen, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mandla Khatebe. I am a mere humble associate professor from the Department of Strategic Communication here at the University of Johannesburg, and I will be the program director for this afternoon. The third Moses Kotane Annual Memorial Lecture, titled The State of Our Movement, the National Democratic Revolution and Building Socialism, Reflections on the Craddock Letter and 100 Years of Unbroken Communist Struggle, to be presented by the National Chairperson of the African National Congress, Kwete Mantashe, takes place few months after we laid to rest Rebecca Kotane, a stalwart in her own right, a partner, a life partner for that matter, and a wife to our former General Secretary, Moses Kotane. But as the title suggests, the title of the lecture suggests, this lecture takes place in the year of the centenary of the South African Communist Party. Therefore, the fundamental importance of the national question that Moses Kotane and his generation grappled with remain pertinent up to this day. Of course, when they grappled with the national question in the context of what Brian Bunton characterized as a complex global system of imperialism, might be different to what we are faced with as this current generation. We are faced with neoliberal form of monopoly capital, which is morphing into digital or platform capitalism. But I will leave that to Professor Marwala because this is his area of expertise to reflect on this question. But what is important for us this afternoon is to understand Moses Kotane in the context of the challenges that we are faced with as this generation. I'm glad that I'm not the one who will be doing all the talking this afternoon. Mine is just a simple task to introduce the speakers and call them to the podium to speak. So without any waste of time, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to introduce the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, Professor Chilizi Marwala, who will be welcoming us, all of us, to this lecture. Professor Marwala is an accomplished scholar with a multidisciplinary research interest that includes the theory of and applications of artificial intelligence to engineering, computer science, finance, social science, and medicine. He has an extensive track record in human capacity development and has published 23 books in artificial intelligence. That is now amazing. Professor Marwala is a Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg, and prior to this role, he was a Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Internationalization, and before that he was Executive Dean of Engineering and Built Environment, both here at the University of Johannesburg. He has served as a deputy chairperson of the Presidential Commission on the 4IR. Ladies and gentlemen, even if you are not here, please put your hands together for the Vice Chancellor, Professor Chilitsi Marwala. Thank you, boss.
Sanibonani. Dimasiari. Honorable Minister Gwede Mantashe, the Chairman of the African National Congress, as well as our Minister of Mineral Resources, members of the Kotane family who are here, the Ambassador, joy seeing you at the university, Honorable Minister and the GS of the SACP, Minister Nzimande, members of the SACP who are watching in the digital platform, and members of the public. Welcome to the 3rd annual Moses Kotane lecture at the University of Johannesburg. This lecture comes at an interesting time in our collective history. We still find ourselves in the cold grip of the COVID-19 pandemic. Leadership and indeed its pitfalls. Globally, the impact of the pandemic has been devastating. We have weathered illness, grief, recessions, and unprecedented job losses. Against this backdrop, we are also experiencing a fundamental paradigm shift in the way of the 4th Industrial Revolution that is actually catalyzed by technologies such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, and Internet of Things. These technologies are changing absolutely everything around us. The means and modes of production are actually changing in a much more fundamental ways than Karl Marx envisaged in his writing many, many years ago. The future of work, the future of human identity, the very nature of the economy is actually changing. And this obviously requires us to invest in education. And in this regard, I would like to extend my congratulations to our minister who just received his Masters of Business Administration. Because without education, we are not going to be able to lead our people in the 4th Industrial Revolution. In fact, we are going to lead them into temptations and deliver them into poverty. Worryingly, however, a survey at the beginning of this year found that unlike many other countries, COVID-19 is not the top concern for South Africans, with citizens more concerned about unemployment than they are about the pandemic. Perhaps the greatest definer of our new world order will be our ability to critically reflect and affect change. I have argued for some time now that this begins with trawling through the annals of history and learning from the leaders who have come before us. It is fitting then, amid this fraught context, that we convene once again to commemorate Moses Kotane. At Kotane's burial at the Novodevichy Cemetery in Moscow in 1978, Dr. Yusuf Dadoo said, and I quote, "In the life of every nation, there arise men who leave an indelible and eternal stamp on the history of their peoples, men who are both products and makers of history, and when they pass, they leave a vision of a new and better life and the tools with which to win and build it. Close quote. Kotane is often termed the chief architect of our struggle. He was the longest serving General Secretary of the SACP and Treasurer of the ANC. So instrumental was he in the struggle that little would be decided without his input. He was the quintessential representation of the workers, and at the time, the driving force behind the struggle. Stuck in my mind are the words of our leader, O.R. Tambo, who was quoted in Kotane's biography saying, and I quote, "Even when Luthuli was confined to the Grootville area in Natal, he would send for Moses to explain or discuss some issue he was uncertain about. Luthuli had so much confidence in Kotane that he would not make up his mind on controversial problems until he had discussed them with Kotane," close quote. This is incredible when you consider that Kotane, who grew up in the depths of Tampostadt in Rustenburg, had received little formal education. Despite his circumstances, he changed his fortunes. And now, especially talking to our students who are watching this, you have no excuse not to succeed. Given the resources and investments, whether it is NSFAS, whether it is the Missing Middle Fund, whether it is the tutorial systems, extensive tutorial systems that we have put into place so that you can succeed, you have no excuse not to succeed. If Kotane could succeed despite his very limited education, what more can you be able to achieve if you are to put efforts into this? Kotane was largely self-taught and an insatiable leader. In my book, Leadership in the 21st Century, I write, "Those who do not read must not lead." Later, as a young worker, Kotane enrolled in the communist-run night school in Ferreira's town, where he deftly weaponized the pen for his political writings. Of course, he understood that old adage that a pen is mightier than the sword. So powerful were his political writings and pull that he was one of the first to be banned under the Suppression of Communism Act, a ban he ignored in support of the Defiance Campaign in June 1952, which he was subsequently arrested for. His notion of economic freedom was predicated on the need for education. This, of course, still rings true today. I would argue that there is no place more fitting to honor his legacy than at the University of Johannesburg. Just a few weeks back, we learned that, according to the Times Higher Education, that the University of Johannesburg is the university whose research is making impact on the sustainable development goals than any other university, not only in South Africa, but in the African continent. And today, the authoritative QS ranking put the University of Johannesburg ahead of Stellenbosch, UKZN, and University of Pretoria. And we do know now that for the first time in our history, the University of Johannesburg produces more research output than any other university except the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So this evening's lecture is entitled The State of Our Movement, the National Democratic Revolution and Building Socialism, Reflections on the Cradock Letter and 100 Years of Unbroken Communist Struggle, and it will be delivered by the Honorable Minister Gwede Mantashe. We could not have picked a better person, a man who started his career in the unions, rising to become the Secretary General of the National Union of Mine Workers. Of course, there was always a tradition in the ANC that developed that from there he had to become the Secretary General of the ANC. And as they say, the rest is history, and he is writing history, and we will be reading about many, many, many achievements that he is going to attain in the next 10 years. So as waves of political change have engulfed the globe, it is integral to interrogate our own political systems. In Kotane's famed 1934 letter in Cradock, he called for the Africanization of the party. This indeed is a concept that must ring through every tier of our leadership, particularly academic leadership. As we grapple with our new normal and forge a path of recovery from the impact of the last year pandemic, it must be done through critical lenses where decisions and conclusions are reached based on data, not on emotional thinking. The minister poignantly asked in a 2015 reflection on Kotane, I'm talking about Minister Mantashe, and I quote, "What other better quality of leadership would one yearn for even in today's world, if not a leader beyond reproach?" Close quote. It is my great belief that this lecture today will be an important contribution to Moses Kotane thought, and indeed finding our way once again to making South Africa a developed society that takes care of its people politically, economically, and otherwise. Ngiyabonga, ndiyalibuwa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that input, Professor Marwala. You have done a sterling job in introducing our guest speaker. I must apologize on behalf of the Deputy National Chairperson of the South African Communist Party, Thula Singesi, who was given a difficult task of introducing our guest speaker. But because of technicalities, he could not be here. So if I do any mistakes in introducing the national chairperson, you cannot blame me, but you can blame Comrade Thulas, who is not here. Because we are now doing what we came to do here. And I urge all of us to take notes, because after the input, we'll have a brief time of question and answer session based on the input that the national chairperson will be doing. Now, Honorable Gwede Mantashe is a long-standing activist and a leader of the mass democratic movement. He rose through the ranks of the National Union of Mine Workers, from being its branch chairperson in Witbank in 1982 to being elected to its regional structure as a regional secretary in 1985. He has been a national organizer of the NUM from 1988 to 1983, and also he has been its assistant general secretary, and ultimately he was elected the general secretary of the NUM in 1998. Honorable Mantashe has been a councillor in Ekurhuleni municipality. He has been an executive director at the Development Bank of Southern Africa before being elected national chairperson of the SACP and Secretary General of the ANC, both in 2007. He therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it makes him better qualified to speak about Moses Kotane, who also simultaneously held office bearer's position in the SACP and the ANC at the same time. Currently, Minister Mantashe is a Minister of Mineral and Energy Resources since May 2019. Amongst his qualifications, Honorable Samson Gwede Mantashe holds a master's degree in sociology from Wits University and is recently, as the Vice Chancellor has been talking about, obtained an MBA from Menkosa. Ladies and gentlemen, please a round of applause for our keynote speaker, Gwede Mantashe.
Can I just talk? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Program Director. Leadership of the University of Johannesburg. I must tell you that I have two alumni from this university in my family, including my wife. Student leadership of the UJ and other universities that are watching this lecture, leadership of the SACP, Comrade Blade Nzimande. Every time you talk about the length of office of general secretary of the party, he always wants to contest that he is the longest. Now, what he doesn't appreciate is that the term of Moses Kotane was cut short by death. So you can't compare the two. Leadership of the alliance, Moses Kotane family, Moses Kotane Foundation. Here's a foundation. The community of UJ at large and surrounding areas, comrades, ladies and gentlemen. Today, the South African Communist Party is 52 days to its centenary. So if you count down, it's 52, 51. Once you say zero, you must know that day is the centenary of the Communist Party. The party is the third oldest organization in South Africa after the ANC and the Broederbond. The ANC was formed in 1912 in Bloemfontein. The Broederbond was formed in 1918 on the three copies in Johannesburg, and the party was formed in 1921. It was the first non-racial organization in South Africa. We must remember that it ended this honor of being the first non-racial party, despite the fact that in its inaugural Congress, there was only one black delegate, T.W. Tibeti. He was a delegate. He was the only black delegate there. But from there, the party grew into a massive non-racial party. So the fact that Tibet was there make it qualify to be the first non-racial party in South Africa. And this was followed by a few years of aggressive recruitment of black members. I've decided not to eulogize Moses Kotane. I will talk about him. I'm not going to eulogize him. The reality makes it real and important to include a memorial lecture on Moses Kotane Umalume in celebrating the build-up of the party centenary. We're building up to that celebration. Moses Kotane was the general secretary of the party from 1939 to 1978. That is the year of his passing on. And the period of Moses Kotane being general secretary provided good lessons about South African revolution. Not only about him, not only about the party, but about the revolution. That's why few of us in the party claim to be Kotanis. You see, many communists say they are Marxist-Leninists. It's fine, we're all. But some of us are Kotanists. I will tell you why it is important to be a Kotanist. Because he had a unique way of driving the revolution in both the ANC and the party without compromising either of the two. Now, the party influenced the revolutionary program without contesting the leadership of the ANC in the National Democratic Revolution phase of the revolution. I'm raising this issue because from time to time when our comrades are angry in the party, particularly the younger generation, party must break away, stand on its own. You must not stand with the ANC. We are tired of this and that. The party influenced the revolutionary program without contesting the leadership of the ANC in the National Democratic Revolution phase of the revolution. Moses Kotane led a communist party that influenced the development of the revolutionary theory of the whole movement led by the ANC. And one key principle that makes one a Kotanist is the understanding that a communist in the ANC must not build communist factions in the ANC. Every communist must never be guilty of laziness and must rather be known for execution. Then if you are known for that, you are a good communist. If you are lazy, you are a bad communist. You are just a member. Some of us now, we say anything we want to say. It has been given a title for me. I'm having something called "You're allowed." You're allowed to say things. If you are lazy and you claim to be a communist, you are a pseudo-communist. If you can't execute tasks, you are a pseudo-communist. If you are divisive, you are a pseudo-communist. And Moses Kotane actually led by example in all these respects now. And developing the principles of the revolution was key to Moses Kotane's term. Yusuf Dadoo captured the revolutionary conviction of Moses Kotane in delivering the eulogy at his funeral. He says, I quote, "But if there is one quality in Moses Kotane which I would single out before all the others, it was that he was incorruptible. He was incorruptible not only in his politics, but also in his personal life." And this character of Moses Kotane Umalume distinguished him as a revolutionary. Now, this is a very important point of being incorruptible today. When everything, you know, if you take mice, you put them in a cheese factory, you say to them, guard this cheese factory, the likelihood is that you're going to find those mice dead, stomach full, to the point of death. Now, were almost in that situation, and therefore the incorruptibility of revolutionaries become a very, very critical point in character of a revolutionary. Now, Comrade Kotane put content to the principle of non-racialism. In the Keynote letter, he insisted on an aggressive program of recruitment of black members into the party. The application of the revolutionary theory could only be relevant if it contributes to the resolution of the contradiction facing our society. And the Keynote letter, written by Moses Kotane to the Johannesburg District Committee in 1934, was emphasizing the urgent need for Africanization of the party. Now, this may sound small because, you see, when you have a theory, it's easy to quote volumes of this is what Marx read, this is what Lenin read, this is what Stalin read, and so forth. But if those theories cannot be applied in the resolution of the contradiction facing our society, they are not relevant. Now, the party theorized these contradictions. It said these are the interrelated, is racism, class, and gender contradiction. And the party insisted that we must resolve all three contradictions of the colonialism of a special type. And this colonialism of a special type is theorized by the party in details. Many people say it is non-communist. In my own view, it's the most communist theory because it was talking to relevant contradiction facing society at the time, where the piece of land contested by the colonizer and the colonized was the same. The difference between us and our neighbor in Mozambique was that colonizers in Mozambique were Portuguese. And that's why once the revolution was over, they left. Here, there was a contestation of the same piece of land. That's why, as long as we have not resolved the land question, the essence of the revolution is still alive. So we should continue with the revolution because it's about the land. It is the contestation for the same piece of land by the colonized and the colonizer. Now, this letter had very serious impact on the party because it was written soon after the 6th Congress of the Communist International, which adopted the Black Republic thesis in 1928. Now, I'm trying to show you that the revolution rolls on. The Communist International adopted the Black Republic thesis in 1928. In 1934, Moses Kotane writes the Keynote letter. The Keynote letter. And this black thesis, this thesis grappled with the possibility of the party creating a mass organization which would carry out liberation and proceed to socialist revolution. That was the Black Republic thesis. That the Communist Party will form a movement that will deal with liberation. Once it achieves liberation, then it will continue with the struggle for a socialist revolution. Now, Moses Kotane comes back and says, if we don't Africanize the party, it will never execute this program. Then he emphasizes the Africanization of the party. This complex question remains on the agenda of the Communist Party today. Hence, the party today still sees the National Democratic Revolution as the shortest route to socialism. Now, it can't be static. It can't be a static theory. That is the shortest route to socialism, unless there are interventions and building blocks for socialism during the National Democratic Revolution. if you just say it is the shortest route and will not try to put together building blocks for a socialist revolution, it is not going to happen. But the party still is occupied with this. We're in the NDR phase, but it is the shortest route to socialism. That's why sometimes when the ANC deals with the party, we have a sense that they want to have representation in this, representation in that, and that. Sometimes we think that, hey, are we bargaining with one another or not? We're not bargaining with one another. You can't put those blocks for socialism unless you're present. If you are not there, you can't build them. You will wish they were there. Now, in 1940, Moses Kotane was elected to the 10th member of Afghan Parliamentary Committee of Lobbyists to be in contact with the Native Representative Council. Many say, why did these communists interact with the Native Representative Council? And don't appreciate that that debate is as long as the debate of whether communists should participate in the Duma, which was regarded as liberal at the time. But they say, you are a 10-member committee, you will engage with the Native Representative Council, and these communities never left things to chances. Any opportunity to influence direction of events was engaged. These young communist leaders in 1930 formed the African Mine Workers Union. Form it. They were battling. TWTB, Bonga, Nomfutsanyana, all of them participated in building this union of Africans, IAMU. And it is this union, despite all the challenges, that actually fought against repression and discrimination. And in 1946, more than 70,000 African mine workers went on strike, led by another communist, John Beaver Marx, you see, J.B. Marx, and the national chairperson of the Communist Party, and the disastrous crushing of that strike by the apartheid regime ended up in the collapsing of the Native Representative Council. So those who were members of the movement were in that Native Representative Council were directed to pull out. When they pulled out, it collapsed. That is a revolution for you. Now, Moses Kotane, the General Secretary of the Communist Party, was equally a Treasurer General of the ANC. He served both organizations loyally and with distinction. He appreciated fully that a good communist must be an ANC member. If you are a communist, you are not an ANC member. Even today, I don't trust you that you are a good communist. You see, if you are a good communist, you must be an ANC member, because it is a mass movement of the revolution. You can't stand aside and watch a mass movement of the revolution disintegrating and claim to be a good communist. He appreciated fully that the principles that guides good communists then should continue guiding good communists today. Now, let me summarize lessons from the life and times of Moses Kotane. The first lesson is written by a man called Maxwell, that success in life is a choice. Success in life is a choice. Where you are born doesn't determine where you end. The Prof made a point very well. Moses Kotane was born in Tambostad in Rustenburg, but ended up the General Secretary of the party. Okay, that's a choice he made. You see, when he did all these things, get involved in this, write the credit letter, be part of the international, of the Communist International, and accept the Black Republic thesis, all that involvement was shaping him as he was shaping the theory. And that choice that he made determined where he ended. Lesson number 2, he was born from a deep Christian family. Moses Kotane, deep Christian family, but ended up a dedicated communist and a devout activist. When I started being active in politics, I was in the student Christian movement at high school, student Christian movement, SCM. And many people, when you talk about SCM, say, it's useless, useless. And what I know is that if you talk about revolutionary morality, it can start from nowhere. It starts with societal morality. Standards, rules that are accepted by society. If you are going to be a revolutionary, you comply with them. The example would be simple. You know that in Area X, there is a big problem of gender-based violence. And you claim to be a revolutionary, but you're indifferent. You're just indifferent. It can be. If you are a revolutionary, you must actually take to heart things that affect society directly. And therefore, deep Christianity, and it goes to Christian revolutionary morality, Christian morality. You know, I was talking to a group of Christians. I said to them, you are all fighting about whether the book of Leviticus is still relevant as a guide for believers. Others say, no, it ended there. They don't want to read the Old Testament. They only read the New Testament. I say, when you do that, now I am talking now as an activist and a revolutionary, you are taking shortcuts. You don't want to have clear standards that distinguish you from the rest. So that Christian morality prepares you for a revolutionary commitment and tasks. And revolution, that is the third lesson, is not an event, but a long involved process, but with clear objectives. Change of governance for the better of society. Replace a repressive government with a progressive and democratic government. The change may be smooth and negotiated. Change may be violent and end up in a rupture. It may be a combination of the two. Now, all of us must appreciate that if we want to be revolutionaries, we must know that we're not going to an event. There is a rally today, therefore we're revolutionaries. No. And the alliances are critical for any revolutionary movement to make maximum impact. That's why you'll see that the movement worked with Clement Kadali, it went with the Communist Party, it went with everybody, because you need as many hands and many brains around you as you can get to win a revolution. With these lessons in mind, we can objectively assess the state of our movement in the country today. Because this is Moses Kotane. He gives us important lessons. Are we sticking to those lessons? Do we stick to the principles? Or it is just history? That's why the difference between trying to understand the principles and eulogizing are two different things. Now, the biggest concern is how did we drift into the corruption crisis as a movement and as a country? That question must be asked, we must be confronted with, we must be made to answer the questions and be honest with answering those questions, because we cannot expect society to measure us against Verwoerd. You know, when they write about Verwoerd, Dominic Smith writes about Smith, many people say he's an architect of apartheid. I say he is not. He is a master builder. The architect is Dr. Malan, who actually invented the term apartheid in 1943. And Verwoerd became the master builder. And he says, we're building apartheid, a system with so deep roots that it is going to be difficult to change for any future government. That is apartheid. And today, when we talk of transformation, we normally throw around numbers and leave it at numbers and not interrogate the content of transformation. What is it that we're transforming? Now, if the ANC, I'm a leader of the ANC, I'm a member of the party, a leader because I'm in the Central Committee, if I expect to be measured against the apartheid leaders, that means I'm letting the revolution down, because people must judge us and expect us to behave at higher level than what we're transforming. So this question about how did our movement drift deep into a corruption crisis is a fundamental question, because it is saying we must be judged above the normal past behaviors. Now, today leaders of the ANC are corrupt in reality and by association. And that is the ugly side of corruption. When there's corruption, it's widespread. If you're in that space, you will be seen as corrupt as well. And somebody asked me, said, yeah, Mr. Mantashe, people always write papers on you and criticize you. And I said to him, no. If you take a responsibility, to be attacked and be insulted is occupational hazard. So it's like going underground as a miner and hope that dust will not touch you. Dust is going to touch you if you go underground. So we must all be asked these questions and we must confront them, and society is within its right to interrogate us on this matter. There was reluctance on the part of you see, now, today we can draw lessons from the Chinese Revolution on how they moved from the situation they were during the Cultural Revolution to a stage where today they say factionalism and corruption is an exception. That's what the communists in China say. Factionalism and corruption in China are an exception. They were in the Cultural Revolution, which almost destroyed the revolution. And it is important for us to go there and draw those lessons. Rules are not the same, because in China, if you steal state resources, maybe that may be the end of your life. Okay. But we must find a way of dealing with corruption so that at a point we must be able to say factionalism and corruption are an exception. Now, corruption is dividing the movement. I must tell you that. It's dividing the movement deeply, and there is resistance to all efforts to fight corruption. Instead of tightening our efforts, we tend to throw mud at each other. You see, when I was an organizer, I taught people to one basic thing. I say, here is the Constitution. And I say, the day you must carry your Constitution in a meeting, open it, read it, know that you are in a crisis. It will not announce. Once we bring the Constitution of the land, that this principle, a step aside, is not in line with the Constitution of the land, we must know we are in a crisis, because it's a voluntary movement. You go and join it. It has its own rules. Now you want it to comply with the Constitution of the land, which is above the Constitution of organization, and ignore the Constitution of the organization. Then we're in a crisis. In the Pulse Conference in 2017, we submitted a diagnostic organizational report which candidly pointed upon the challenges of that we need urgent attention as a movement. There was reluctance to be on the part of the structures. I can tell you, I participated in drafting this document. Let me just read you headlines. Side. One, external threats to the revolution. You must be able to analyze external threat to the revolution. That is objective factors. 2, you must appreciate that blaring of common purpose weakens the movement. Because that's a good movement. That's why we don't read the Constitution. We assume to know it, because there is a common purpose. Once that common purpose is blared, the movement is weakened. The growing trust deficit between the people and the movement is an issue that must worry the movement. Where people, you go to Soweto and then they say, hey, because they are losing trust to the movement. We must deal with that issue. The need to uphold ethics, values, and traditions of the movement. I'm just giving you e-headlines. The ANC perceived as inherently corrupt. We must deal with that issue. These issues, the decline of the quality of branches and membership. Now, all these issues are given to the structures of the ANC in 2017 to say, unless we pay attention to these issues, we are in trouble. We are in trouble. And people were reluctant to deal with that issue. Then the 54th National Conference resolved on a step aside. There's a rule at Dumega Kulwap, it's very famous, it was a step aside. But this step aside is being taken apart for selfish reasons, in case if we can happen. So I must weaken the impact of this resolution, so in case I can become a victim. But if I must be a victim, I must be a victim. Simple. And therefore, in celebrating Moses Kotane's life and times, we must appreciate that the economic reconstruction and recovery is very important. I want to ask Prof that the economic section of UJ must pull out the progression. You know, after the lockdown in the first quarter of last year, economy was a disaster. Second quarter was total disaster. Recovery, third quarter. Better performance for fourth quarter. Done well in the first quarter. Now that progress is important for South Africa. You know, I'm in mining and energy. I looked at it, mining recovers by 18%. It was 288 in the third quarter, and slightly lower in the fourth quarter. Now 18 again leading this quarter. And I watch that space because that is the task given to me. Equally, I look into the negative contribution of electricity, gas, and water, and begin to ask what are the issues that must be addressed in this space. All revolutionaries who are given tasks must be able to do that. And therefore, in celebrating the life of Moses Kotane, we must engage ourselves in the cleansing of our movement. We must strengthen the ANC, we must strengthen the alliance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Gwete, for that very interesting input. I think it really deserves a larger audience that could give you a proper standing ovation, because it goes to the heart of what we are interested in celebrating the life of the stalwart of the revolution of South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, please do remember that we are going to go to the item from the family just to give an input and as a form of a response. Then we will be taking questions for all our panelists, which include our keynote speaker, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, the Vice-Chancellor, who made a very interesting remarks in linking on the importance of reading. And we also have Ambassador Joseph Kotane from the family who will also be taking your questions. But let me, before we go to that item, take this opportunity to invite Ambassador Kotane to come and make few inputs. Ambassador Kotane is the eldest son of Moses Kotane. He's a former member of Umkhonto weSizwe from 1962. So he is no slouch when it comes to the revolution. He was the ambassador to Algeria from 2010 to 2015. He's a comrade, a leader, a commander, and a board member of the Moses Kotane Foundation. Honorable Ambassador, please come to the floor.
Thank you. The Program Director, Professor Mandla Khadebe, Secretary General of the ANC, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, the Secretary General of the ICCP, Comrade Bonginkosi Nzimande, the Deputy Secretary General of the SACP, Comrade Soli Mapaile, Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg, Professor Chilizi Marwano, the Chief Executive Officer of the Moses Kotane Foundation, Comrade Steve Mashia, the leaders of the ANC, the SACP, COSATU and SANCO, the business partners and supporters of the Moses Kotane Foundation, the leaders and members of the various religious denominations, the staff, workers, and students of the University of Johannesburg, members of the media, and the viewers of the year 2021 Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture. A good afternoon and best wishes to you all from the members of the Moses and Rebecca Kotane family on today's occasion of the presentation of the year 2021 Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture. The Moses and Rebecca Kotane family, whose members are beneficiaries of the Moses Kotane Foundation, foremostly thank the leadership of the South African Communist Party, the Moses Kotane Foundation, and the Faculty of Arts, Design, and Architecture of the University of Johannesburg for their ongoing upholding and advancing of the legacy of Moses Mawani Kotane through the yearly holding of the Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture. The Moses Kotane Now, the Moses and Rebecca Kotane family is contributing to today's holding of the year 2021 Moses Kotane Memorial Lecture, in contributing to today's holding of the year 2021 Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture. Salutes and convey lasting gratitude to the following people: to the leadership of the South African Communist Party, the Moses Kotane Foundation, and the University of Johannesburg for initiating and organizing the year 2021 Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture. 2, to Professor Chilizi Marwala, the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg, for his approval and all-round support for hosting the year 2021 Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture, year in the Faculty of Arts, Design and Architecture. To the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Internationalism, Professor Saura Sinha, and Dr. Bonginkosi Nzimande, the Secretary General of the South African Communist Party, for the cooperation in the finalization of the arrangement and organization of today's Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture. And fourthly, to the Chief Executive Officer of the Moses Kotane Foundation, Comrade Steve Masia, for assuring that the active participation of the Moses and Rebecca Kotane family in today's Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture, to express the lasting gratitude of the family to the leadership of the SACP, the Moses Kotane Foundation, and the University of Johannesburg for assuring the legacy of Moses Mawani Kotane lives forever through the yearly holding of the Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture. The Moses and Rebecca Kotane family, in its contribution to today's holding of the year 2021 Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture, therefore also salute and express its deep-seated gratitude to Comrade Gwede Mantashe, who was delivering the keynote address of the year 2021 Moses Kotane Memorial Lecture. The Moses and Rebecca Kotane family further wishes to highlight the following. 1, that the Moses and Rebecca Kotane family members, in honor and remembrance of Moses Mawani Kotane, has really been visiting his heritage reburial gravesite in Matlaku/Pela village in the Northwest Province. And 2, that with the passing on of Mary Rebecca Mura Kotane on the 31st January 2021 and a burial on the 6th February 2021 at the Moses Mawani Kotane Heritage Reburial Gravesite, that this gravesite is now being named the Moses and Rebecca Kotane Heritage Gravesite. In closing, the Moses and Rebecca Kotane family wishes to convey the following humble request to the leadership of the South African Communist Party, the Moses Kotane Foundation, and the University of Johannesburg. One, that the yearly Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture of the SCCP, the Moses Kotane Foundation, and the Faculty of Art, Design and Architecture should henceforth be interchangeably held here at the University of Johannesburg and at Matlaku village in the Northwest Province, where Comrade Moses Mawani Kotane and Comrade Rebecca Mura Kotane lie in eternal rest at the Moses and Rebecca Kotane Heritage Site. 2. That after the yearly Moses Mawani Kotane Memorial Lecture in Matlaku, Pela Village, the representatives of the SACP, the Moses Kotane Foundation, the University of Johannesburg, and the Moses and Rebecca Kotane families should lay their respective wreaths on the graves of Comrade Moses Mawani Kotane and on that of Comrade Rebecca Mura Kotane. With that, I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kotane, for those important remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the important time where we'll be taking a few questions. Remember, you can post them either on Facebook. You can also post them either on our YouTube channel, those who are watching on YouTube, to all our speakers on the very interesting and sobering remarks made by the national chairperson of the ANC, Comrade Gwede Mantashe. There is a first question that I would like to post. It comes from Sillo on Facebook. It's directed to Comrade Gwede Mantashe. It says, how confident is the ANC that it will win the fight against corruption? Does Comrade Gwede agree that the current renewal of the ANC will result positively in the upcoming local government elections? That's the first question. I think let's deal with that because I think it talks to the very important point raised in your input, Comrade Gwede, on the importance of renewal in the context of the deep-seated problem of corruption in the country. You can see, I think your mic is on. You can just respond while sitting down here. I think the camera will change to you.
The difference between natural science and social science is that if you mix water and syrup, you produce cool drink. That's natural science. Social science is a different discipline. It depends on the interventions you make, the consistency, and the time you take. And my own view is that the ANC must take more confidence in dealing with corruption until society sees that it is serious about it. And my own view is that if we're consistent, we take our time, we don't retreat when people hurl insults at us, we will win the battle against corruption. It's dividing the ANC. If we don't defeat it, it will kill the ANC.
Thank you very much for that question. There's a question that I received. I don't see the person who posted that question that is directed to you, Comrade Gwede. It pertains to the point that you raised on the road to socialism. The SACP always perceiving the NDR as the most direct and the shortest route to socialism, the person says, the manner in which you raise this question, are you not distorting the position of the SACP in talking about crude stagism in the West version, that after the national liberation, then you move to socialism?
No, I raised the issue of liberation, then build socialism, in the context of the Black Republic thesis, not on the basis of the theory of the party today. In the Black Republic thesis, it was that it was envisaged that the party will form a mass movement that will liberate and then build socialism. The party has always appreciated the fact that the NDR is important for our route to socialism. The only question I'm raising is, unless consciously we put the bricks of socialism during the stage of NTR, that route may belong. That's all I'm raising. I'm not distorting it. I know that NTR is the shortest route to socialism, but it requires us to put bricks of building socialism during that NTR to achieve the socialist stage of the revolution.
Thank you very much. There's a question I received, and I think that I will pose it to both you as well as the Vice Chancellor, because there is a digital element to it. It's a question on the national question. The point that you raised. So the first part is that when you were speaking about the national question in the context of the generation of Moses Kotane, informed to an extent by the 1914 thesis of by Lenin on the right of nations to self-determination, which was a need to deal with a form of change in capitalism, capitalism taking over from feudalism. The question is, what are the challenges now that this current generation must grapple with in addressing the national question? And that's the first part to you, Comrade Gwede. The second part of the question talks to the second part of the national question in the context of what is emerging, or what some call digital feudalism. In other words, this digitalism that is taking place, where, for example, it's taking in the model of investors. And if you look at Marxism, you could think of them as kings who then grant the resources to techpreneurs, who you can think of, Vice Chancellor, as the lords. I know you read a lot of Marxism. And these are the lords who then turn these softwares and sell them to the masses for use. However, the manner in which this software is unleashed, it often prioritizes the exchange value over use value. In other words, there is crude interest and focus on profit maximization. How then can we think of the national question in the context of this digital reality? So that's the second part for you, VC. Let me start with you, Comrade Gwede, to deal with the first part of the question of the national question.
The national question is one question that is always having a risk of being vulgarized. That's why there's a running debate today of monopoly capital or white monopoly capital, which is, in my own view, un-Marxist. Monopoly capital is monopoly capital irrespective of its color. Now, what the challenge is facing the current generation is appreciating that it is not a question of age. It is a question of contribution. I normally tell young people that, you know, the 1944 ANC Youth League, in 1949 got into the NEC, and they had 8 members in the NEC, including the Secretary General. It was not because of their age. It was because they developed the program of action, and therefore they got into the NEC of the ANC because of the contribution they made as architects of the program of action. It was correct for them to be in the NEC. That's why if you take 2 concepts, the first concept is youth takeover. I always tell people that that is a materialistic concept. But generation mix is a political concept where you understand that Ambassador Kotane, the age jacket doesn't make him finished. He's not finished, he's here. He has wisdom, he has experience. Now we need young people to work with him and actually grow and guided by him. And the young people, to me, are correct when they are impatient, when they are in a hurry. But they need old people who will say, if you run at that speed, you're going to fall off the cliff. Apply some brakes. And therefore, that is the issue. To me, the current generation must be active. It must have what they want to achieve, work on it, invest on it, and not think of event. Appreciate that development, revolutions are all processes that take time. They need your patience, they need your time, they need your energy, they need your resources.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Khadebe. Maybe just to add to what Minister Mantashe has just said on the national question, because if you were to perhaps go back and read, I think Stalin wrote quite a great deal about the national question. He really was focusing on the issue of identity. Because as we know, the Soviet Union was a country that was very diverse. Of course, the dominant nation in that setup was Russia, and Stalin was not even Russian. He was Georgian. But now we are living in the digital age, where the very nature of nationality is changing. Part of the reason why there is extreme ultra-nationalism is because there are people who feel that this new globalized era is actually undermining nationalities. So there is a whole new world that has emerged, the cyber world, where many of us have identities in that cyber world, whether it is in Facebook, whether it is in Twitter. There's even now a talk of a digital grave, because people die, but they never really leave the cyberspace. You can still go to their profiles, and every year you see people, memorializing them. So in this digital world, a new issue is emerging: digital citizenship. I was just reading about, I think it is one of the Finland, where now they have introduced a digital work permit. Normally, when you want to go and work in a country, you have to apply for a work permit. How do you do that? Then they issue what is called digital permit. So you are allowed to work in that country, but digitally, not necessarily there. So, so as young people, grappling with these issues of identity, grappling with these issues of nationality, grappling with this issue of operating both in the physical world and the digital world, with all sorts of implications. I think it's an exciting period for young people. But if you are not studying, and you are studying hard, then the issues of class, you know, you will become victim of that, because you will just be consumer of those goods and services that are in the digital platform, but not producer of this digital platform. Just to give you maybe just a bad statistic, you know, the amount of apps that are developed in Africa is actually less than 2%. You know, and as young people, you have to be participants in that, because if you are not participant, the nature of this new world is going to exclude you, is going to exclude your identity, and you will ultimately just be a product. Now, on the issue of techno-feudalism, I actually wrote a book recently on books that I've read, and one of the books that I read was The 18th Brumaire of Bonaparte, written by Karl Marx, trying to make sense of the Second French Revolution, you know, and what happened there. Obviously, the issues of class emerged. The issues of because feudalism was pretty much well, not really defeated in the First French Revolution, because you know, Napoleon took over. And then the monarchy came back in France after Napoleon. So there were still many remnants of that feudal era, and of course the bourgeoisie had appropriated much of that power that used to be on the hands of the marquis and the lords of the period era. But now we are living in another era where feudalism is re-emerging. You now have what is called techno-barons. These are people who become super rich by coming up with apps. Facebook is just an app after all, you know, or Twitter, you know, or a person who comes from South Africa, Elon Musk, $200 billion in one man. And these people are effectively charting our futures. Now, what is the future of the state in an era like that? What is the future of the state in an era where what Marx would have called the working class is actually going to disappear, because much of the work, and Minister Mantashe, you will know this, even when you were still in the unions, it was already happening, automation. Of course, with artificial intelligence, is even hyper-automation, where machines are able to repair themselves. Now, we know where that is going. Where it is going is that you are going to have factories with very, very, very few people. And they already have very, very few people in factories, and production being done by machines. Now, during those eras, trade unions were discovered because you had many, many people in the workplace. Now, what happens during the time when the workplace has fewer people? Of course, it's no longer about exploitation, certainly not in the workplace. It will be about human irrelevance. What do you do in an era where the relevance of human beings is actually being eroded? And as young people, or anybody, what happens to the economy? The aggregate demand is actually going to fall, because if people are out of jobs, who is going to buy all these things that these robots are going to produce? So capitalism is actually going to face a crisis. But of course, I read Bill Gates says, in an era like that, we need to start taxing robots. You know, a robot that is in the workplace must be taxed. For those of us know that have spent quite a great deal in the factory, in the technological space, we know how difficult it is. A Microsoft Word is a robot. You no longer need somebody to look over your spelling. It automatically does that, even though there is colonization of a special type there, because it almost always forces you to use American spelling over British spelling, you know, so they're imposing the dominant economic order of America in that space. So and that is why, in fact, that was Elon Musk actually proposed this, but it was not him who actually first proposed this. It was Thomas Paine who did this. Thomas Paine was in the American Revolution and was also in the French Revolution. The universal basic income will have to come back to the table if automation continues. Well, it's not even if, given the pace at which automation is actually happening. So Thomas Piketty wrote a book, Capital in the 21st Century. I think Minister and Mandla, I think we need to see a book on capital in the fourth industrial revolution, where issues that Marx raised actually have to be re-looked at, given the fact that a robot is a very important part of the productive forces of our time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, VC, for those questions. I've got 3 last questions that I'm going to take, and then we are going to move towards the closure of the program. The 2 questions are directed to Comrade Gwede Mantashe. The one is to Ambassador Kotane. So the first one, Ambassador, is that we often speak of Moses Kotane, the revolutionary. Moses Kotane, the leader, and Moses Kotane, all that. But we often neglect the part that Moses Kotane was a family man, reflected by your input today. So the question is, how does the Kotane family always remember Moses Kotane, the family man? And are you able to separate the two, Moses Kotane, the leader, from Moses Kotane, the family man? The 2 last questions are directed at Comrade Gwede Mantashe from Comrade Hope Papu. The first question is that does Comrade Gwede attributes the deep respect instead of dismissing that Moses Kotane had for religion and cultural practices of the majority Africans to his family background? I hope you understand that question. Gwede. The second one, why is it so important for socialists and communists to understand, respect, and work with multiple identities of the working class and mixed strata and be part of the ICT space for the benefit of the working class? Perhaps also, VC, if you have a view on that second question, you might also reflect on it. And the last question, before I forget it, it was posted by Sillo on YouTube. It's also to you, Comrade Gwede. Just Sillo wants you to clarify the point you made on science and social sciences, please. So those are the 4 last questions we are going to take. The 3 I directed at Comrade Gwede. The first is to Ambassador Kotane. So Ambassador, will start with you, and then we give Comrade Gwede the chance to respond on those 3 questions.
Well, thanks for the question. I've got my. You can hear me. As Comrade Mantashe has mentioned already, Mtate Kotane never mixed issues to do with the Communist Party, issues to do with the ANC, and also issues to do with the trade union movement where he was one of the leaders. So, as a leader, right, we as children found it very strange that our father is always involved with his colleagues, and he is a respectable member of our community. But the children next door have got bicycles and we don't have. Other people have got their own houses and we are living in a two-room rented house. Now, it took years for me to understand that as a person who's truly a revolutionary, for him, the personal interest was not the issue. It was more to do with our people, society as a whole. Now, also, as a family man, what I can remember is that whenever he had free time, he would be at home, working at the kitchen table, but now and again standing up
to do chores related to the family. He would go to the tap that's outside in the yard and fetch water and bring it into the house. Now, Mtate Kotane was a normal, general person, you know, irrespective of how he was engaged in the different political, what you call, structures and holding senior positions in them. Sometimes he would say to me, "Come here, walk with me." And I ask him, "Where are we going to?" He says, "No, let's just walk." And then we go out of the yard, walk down the street, right down in township to the avenues below, and we're talking, you know. And then he would say to me, "Okay, now you wait here." And then he would walk down the street, go into a yard, and I'd see him the next day, or 2 days later, or much later. And I would never know, when he goes into that yard, what's happening there. But later on, with the years, especially when he got sick, and I was asked in exile to be with him every morning, and at night go back to the camp. He would explain all these things to me, you know. And I realized that when he enters a yard, in fact, he's not only going into that yard. There's a double up in that yard. You know, a gate that you can go through into the next yard, and into the next, and that's where he meets his colleagues, and they would move off. And so it's something as a child, as you grow up, that you have to understand, that you have to learn that things are not usually what you expect as a child, right? It's something that you learn much later in your years, that there's much more just to a person than what you see at face value. And I think that goes to all of us here. We look at people at face value, and we measure people at face value. But then there's more to a person than simply what you see at face value. Now, for instance, Comrade Murala here has just said he has written 24 books. When you see him in the street, what do you see? You see 24 books. You treat him at face value, right? And that's why, as Comrade Mantashe has said, we should, and Comrade Morales said, we should read, and we should read. And learn more and more about what actually people are all about. Kotane was a family man, and Kotane was a person involved in the struggle. And he had to measure the two of them and use them as best as he could. It's not easy, but that's what he did.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Kotane, Comrade Mantashe.
Okay. No, I made a simple point about sciences. That natural science and exact science. That's it. And social sciences are not exact sciences. They involve a lot of effort around them. That's all I made. That's the only point I made. I'm not putting social science against natural science. The nature of the two sciences is that one is exact, one is not exact. On the deep respect of Moses Kotane for religion, is it because of his Christian background? No, I think it's more than that. Moses Kotane, to me, was a good communist. That's one thing I understand about him. He was a good communist. And therefore, he appreciated the importance of understanding the material conditions around you, if you want to relate to them. If you sit in a village of 80% of that village being Christians, and you become a snob because you're a communist, you are not going to be able to reach out to them. I was a leader of the student Christian movement at school, student Christian movement. And that made us reach out to many young people at school at the time. And at that time, there was still a lot of confusion. And no distinction between ANC and PAC, almost the same, as if it's two sides of the same coin. And that's how it was explained. But it made us able to reach out for many people. And out of that, learn and grow. And I think Moses Kotane understood the conditions in South Africa better than many of us. He understood. That's why today, many of the activists hardly go to church. And my own view is that is a mistake, that where people go, you don't need to be a deep religious person, but you must go because that's where people are. You interact with people there, you talk to them there, you understand them better there. And I think that was the point that guided it. The multi-phase of the working class, what does that question say?
It says, why is it important for socialists or communists to understand and respect and work with the multiple identities of the working class and the middle strata and be part of the ICT space for the benefit of the working class?
Okay. I will only deal with the first part. Prof will deal with the latter part.
Perhaps, let me just quickly pose this one because I said it's the last question, but I see
I was born before technology.
this one is coming in. Yes, we'll leave the technology one to the VC. So this one, well, as you answer that question, perhaps add this one that it has disappeared. Oh, well, okay, continue. Benis, you've deleted it. I wanted to ask the one of
No, the person has retracted it.
he was basically asking, when is the ANC prepared to involve people who are younger into its leadership structures? I think that was the essence of the question, if I remember it.
No, actually, that question, let me start with it. It's a very important question. Actually, there is no organization that involves young people like the ANC. I can say that with confidence because if you look at the ANC, I go to Parliament every day. I listen to young people debating in Parliament. I make a distinction in the content of the debate between a young person who has gone through the structures of the ANC Youth League and people who have gone through programs, then accelerated into leadership. The difference is, even when the Youth League is at its worst shape, it makes people get to the discipline of reading, analyzing, and making decisions. Because you are forced to do that because in a structure, if you get out of order, you get called to order. And I think if you look in this, you can look into the Parliament. The constituency of the ANC in Parliament of young people is bigger than many of these parties. But the reason, the difference is that the ANC is 109 years old. It has a multiple generations in its body. That doesn't mean there are no young, but there are many. If you look into the cabinet, you find that there was a number of young cabinet ministers then. For example, when I talk to Abo Lamula, Abo Mamluku, Abo Okumbuzo, you can list them. You know what I say to them? I say, I don't want them to call me colleague, they must call me college. Because I'm not their colleague, I'm old. I'm much older than them. Because they are actually integrated. It is generation mix. It's not a youth takeover. It's generation mix. I want people to go to Parliament and go and look at young chairpersons of committees there and whips of committees. Young people doing good work, developing with their involvement, and that is what is important. So the ANC involved young people, and that is one thing that we are not short of. There are many young people, but we are not subscribing to youth takeover. We want a generation mix. The question of multiple of the working class. The working class is not homogeneous. It has never been homogeneous in any way because as a young person, you come from a home. The class character of that home determines your character. If I grew up in Kala, where I grew up in a village, actually I learned skills from being a headman, by being a shepherd. I learned skills from going to school, and therefore those skills all assemble in me as I grow. They guide you in the real life. I was sharing with my comrades in the party. I say, my uncle taught me a very basic principle. He said to me when I was young, he said, because if you go to the Eastern Cape, Xhosa Spring were categorized into school Xhosa and red Xhosas. Now, we are from the red Xhosas. We're blanket people. School was not our priority. Our priority was stick fighting and heading sheep and cattle. In that process, it give you a very basic principle. You must never allow a teacher's child to make you a horse because he has meat at his home. Beat him up and come back home and eat dry stem mealies at home. That principle tells you that you must be self-respecting. You must not succumb to pressure because of material benefits. And it guides you throughout the life. And therefore, the Communist Party is one party that is better positioned to understand that diversity of people. But if I grow up in a township, he was a chap and so forth. When I grow up in Kala, it's kunjani ayisiyapila, ayikho embi. See, hey, uyagula ubani. You see, it's health. Why in the city, how's a chap and you run? No, everything is fast. And the Communist Party is the most properly positioned party to understand those dynamics and integrate them.
Just repeat the one on ICT.
Basically, it was that in the context of these multiple identities of the working class and the middle strata, how can they be part of the ICT space for the benefit of the working class?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe just to add on what the minister said, you know, that class character actually influence many other factors later on. I mean, just one example is the Gang of Five. Were they five? The Makiwani brothers were part of the Gang of Eight. You know, and many people characterize it as Africanist thinking, but in that war there was a class dimension, because the Makiwanes are from the educated background in Eastern Cape. When I was at school, I was always taught that the first nurse was from the Makiwane family, you know. And O.R. Tambo, if you read the background of O.R., actually came from the peasant. He was a peasant, you know. And apparently they used to say, but how can you be led by a peasant? You know, so that class dimension that actually appeared, you know, when in exile, and of course, it did not end well, certainly for the Makiwane brothers. So, how do the young people actually get involved? I think the most important thing is to be educated. Educate yourself about these technologies. Because if you are not educated, you can't even begin to participate. Read and read widely. One of the things, Minister, that I've introduced here, and out of this, I wrote a book that I'm going to hand over to you in a few minutes, I read a book every month, and I invite staff and students to actually come and discuss the book. And for example, one of the books that I read was The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. People think it is a critic of Marx, but and in many ways it was, but it was about the role of religion in the building of capitalism. You know, that religion, the superstructure, actually influences the behavior of people towards and ultimately building capitalism. Very, very important. And the reason why we introduced this Vice Chancellor's Reading Club was because we were very worried that people are no longer reading. So I will go to a department and say, when was the last time you read a book? People say, no, I have not read a book this year. So, you know, this is actually worrying. Read and read widely. And what we do at University of Johannesburg, and this is what South African universities are missing, we try to give students education in its totality. What do I mean by that? If you are doing human and social sciences, you should also take courses in technology. If you are doing engineering, you should also take human and social sciences. Very, very important, you know. Because now we have all these engineers, they go and work for Google, and they are doing speech recognition tool. You speak to it in English and it translates it in isiZulu. How does anybody do that if they don't understand linguistics? And part of the reason why many of these devices don't work, just try Google Translate. You know, I tried and I put the word akwetlanga lungetlanga. It is talking about nations. Thinks you're talking about nations. Of course, it is about condolences. And the reason for that is because you have an engineer who has not studied social sciences, who has not studied language, who is designing something that is supposed to address societal issues. So what you ought to do is to read and read widely. You don't have to be an expert. For example, at the University of Johannesburg, we have a course called Artificial Intelligence. All our students have to take it. You are not going to be programming, but you will know what this technology is all about, what it's going to do, what it is doing. We also have a course called Africa Insights module. Because if you're going to create products for the African market, you have to understand the market. And before COVID, we used to even have Africa Innovation by Bus, where we took our students to Mozambique, to Lesotho, to Zambia, to Zimbabwe, to Namibia, and also to Botswana. And we were hoping last year that we were going to take them to Uganda via Kigali, because we believe that as you are in a bus and you are coming out, you will be able to identify the problems, and you will be able to come up with the solutions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. That's the example you're making about the need to understand technology if you're in social sciences and vice versa is very important. Someone close to me was telling me about a bridge in Sentin, when you go to Sentin, which was built by engineers. That bridge is now occupied on Sundays when it's empty. It's the guys who are smoking nyaupe occupy that bridge. Now the people who are supposed to use that bridge don't use it, then they still go and cross the freeway, putting their lives in danger. Simply suggests that the bridge was built by engineers who never understood social issues. So that connection is very, very important. We have so many questions that are coming through. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to go through all of them. What we'll do, we'll take them, and we are hopeful that both the Vice Chancellor and Comrade Gwete, as well as the Ambassador Kotane, will have time to reach out to those that require specific responses, like the ones Comrade Gwete on mining. I think we'll share them with you, and you can respond to the specific people who are raising them, because we have come to the end of the program today. But Vice Chancellor, before I call you over to do what you wanted to do, to thank the national chairperson, I think it is important that to just emphasize some of the key points, the salient points that were raised as part of this lecture today. I think for me, the one that is important is that the relevance of the program of the party, the South African Road to Socialism, buttressed by the medium-term vision, remains relevant, that the party must continue to occupy, because the program says the party must occupy key sites of power. And those sites include the economy, the state, the workplace, the communities, and so on and so forth. It's what Comrade Gwede was talking to us about today in relation to the generation of Kotane and Kotane himself, in understanding that to advance socialism, it must be the quickest route is at the terrain of the national democratic revolution. The example that occupying key sites of power is found in the example you made, that they build the trade union movement. Those are good communist members. And I think that we have to underline that very important point, but also that you choose to be successful in life. Sometimes you make choices, and it's about choices that we make. Even though the revolution is not a sprint, but it is a marathon, but it requires clear objectives and clear goals that must be achieved. And the levels that revolutionaries must be judged are very important. We cannot be comparing revolutionaries to former apartheid leaders. And I think that, for me, is one of the key points that we have to take. Thank you very much, Comrade Gwede, for that very, very interesting lecture. So that I don't come back here, VC, let me just take this opportunity in closing the session to thank everyone who has been involved in putting together this very successful lecture, in particular the UJ team, from the Office of the Deputy Vice Chancellor, working together with the office of the head office of the South African Communist Party in particular. I'm told they were working with Jenny and Vuyiswa. The Moses Kotane Foundation led by Steve Mashia. The Office of the Minister made it very possible for Comrade Gwede to be here. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to you, Comrade Gwede, to grace the occasion as the keynote speaker. The Office of the Vice Chancellor that often champions these events, and the Vice Chancellor himself who made time to come and engage. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone who might not have been mentioned, who made this event a big success. VC, I now hand over to you to officially thank Gwede, and you can then close the session for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mandla, and I would like to thank the UJ team. You have been fantastic. Berenice, Bettine, thank you very much for your hard work. And also, I would like to thank the SACP for partnering with us to honor Ntate Moses Kotane, and also to thank the Minister. Minister, it's actually the first time I am seeing you on our campus, and we are hoping that you are going to come to this campus many more times. We are a dynamic university. Your predecessor, Franz Valeni, is one of our important member of council.
No, I'm his predecessor.
Oh yeah.
I'm his.
Yeah.
No, predecessor is somebody who came after you.
No, before.
The other.
Oh, okay. Well, I speak 11 official languages. Your successor. Your successor, Franz Valeni, is actually a very important member of our UJ Council, and we hope to be working very closely with you. This is your home, as you have already indicated. You have one of the largest members of our convocation in your own house. 3 people in one house is actually quite substantial, and thank you very much. I have prepared, I'm going to hand over a book that I'm going to read. Yeah. So this is the book. It's leadership lessons from books I read.
I'm going to read.
Yeah. It's 50 books.
Face this side, Vice Chancellor, so
that they can see. So this book has 50 chapters. Africa and the Diaspora, Searching for the Ideal Polity. You will actually enjoy Social Contract, The Age of Reason, The 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte by Karl Marx, Max Weber, and then on Science and Technology, books on science and technology, and what we can actually be able to learn. And on leading nations, I had to talk about Deng Xiaoping, a book by Deng Xiaoping, Governance of China, Leadership in Turbulent Times. So thank you very much, Minister, and I am looking forward to welcoming you again here at the University of
You
Johannesburg.
see that young man, he works in my office. He knows that I'm doing what you are doing to them in a smaller scale. I go, I buy books, I donate to them, and say, read it and you give to so-and-so. And buy another book, say, read it, give it to so-and-so, and so forth. They know that I read a book a month.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
When I'm not studying. When I'm studying, I read more. When I'm sitting, I read a book. So I will read this one now.
Well, thank you
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's more than a gift.
Thank you very much. See you over there.
Thank you very much. The session is over.
The University of Johannesburg. The future reimagined.